Hello, this is Catherine Runswick-Colt for Critical Disability Studies at MMU, and I'm here with Anne McGuire. Anne, can you tell us a little about what your role is?
So I am currently just beginning a new position at the University of Toronto at New College in the Equity Studies program, particularly as an assistant professor in disability studies. So I teach disability studies related courses.
That's great. And you've recently finished a PhD. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. My PhD was in the Department of Sociology and Equity Studies here at OISE. We're in the building right now.
Yeah.
And so, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at U of T. And I wrote my dissertation on, the title of it was called The War on Autism, on Normative Violence and the Cultural Production of Autism Advocacy. So in particular, I was kind of looking at the cultural phenomenon that has emerged around autism. So autism not as kind of an individual condition that's located in individual bodies or a medical diagnosis, but autism as a cultural production that is put together by us as actors in this culture. And more particularly, I'm looking at, or I was looking at, I guess I'm always talking in the present, I was looking at autism advocacy and its role in creating and managing this phenomenon called autism. And I kind of explore what I feel to be some emergent dangers that have come about in the past 10 years or so. And I look at, for example, the cultural tendency to only think of and narrate and talk about autism in terms of a threatening disorder and need of an immediate solution, or and often in need of elimination or cure, or to be eliminated using any means possible. And I kind of look at how this culture, which I'm terming a culture against autism, and it articulates, you hear this in everyday life all the time, in newspaper headlines and television program storylines, and in scientific reports, and in government policies, where the only way to talk about or think about or articulate autism is to talk about it or think about it, articulate it in terms of something that needs to be stopped, something that needs to be cured, something that needs to be eliminated. And in the face of this culture, we have an autism advocacy, a dominant autism advocacy, that is, I argue, supporting this culture of being against autism instead of contesting it, which I think perhaps is a role that we need to think about advocacy as doing if we want to think about imagining autism as something other than just a problem in need of a solution, or a dangerous threat in need of intervention and elimination.
In your thesis, I know you used the phrase advocating otherwise. Can you say a little bit more about what you might mean by that?
Well, I think it's related to what I am saying here, that autism, advocacy is very often supporting the dominant order of a culture that desires the non-autistic body, or desires normalcy above everything else and at the expense of everything else. And to advocate otherwise, I think, is a very radical act that goes against the cultural demand for normalcy. And I hope that in kind of focusing on and understanding how discourses of autism and autism advocacy are very carefully put together to support the kind of the hegemony of normalcy. I think that's Leonard Davis's term. Yeah. Advocacy is reproducing more of the same, more normalcy, or the demand for normalcy. Whereas to advocate otherwise, I think, as to live otherwise or to think otherwise, is to think about ways of approaching, imagining, orienting to this phenomenon of autism in new ways, in different ways, in ways that we haven't even thought of yet, rather than kind of that constant rearticulation of the same, which I think I talk about in my thesis as being rather dangerous in kind of everyday material world, where bodies are being understood as, autistic bodies are being understood as non-desirable and sometimes non-viable in a very normative and normativizing world.
I know that you've just finished your PhD, but I also know that you have some publications already. If people wanted to follow up some of your work, could you suggest where they might look for that?
Sure. Actually, a lot of my dissertation is not published formally as of yet. I have, my thesis is just coming out now, I guess. But I do have a paper in the Journal of Educational Philosophy and Theory that I co-wrote with Dr. Rod McCalco, and it's called Minds Between Us, Autism, Mind Blindness, and the Uncertainty of Communication. And I think this paper, for example, is an invitation to start thinking about what autism has to teach us about the inherent uncertainty of communication, and this idea of autism as teacher, as opposed to autism as a threat, or all these other kinds of ways we have of imagining autism, or as a pathology, or a set of deviances. And I have an article coming out called Representing Autism, and it's coming out, it should be coming out any day now, in Atlantis, a women's studies journal here in Canada. And yeah, I have one more article, which is not exactly talking about autism, but it is talking about kind of the role of representing disability, and kind of the ethics of speaking on behalf of another, and it's in DSQ, the Disability Studies Quarterly.
Okay.
So.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you, Catherine.